Hello, you absolute legends. High scores are a serious business, and none take them more seriously than Billy Mitchell. Video game player of the century, multiple-time Donkey Kong World Champion, achiever of the first perfect Pac-Man, and if you publicly deny any of these accolades, he will sue you. Mitchell has a fascination with trying to use the legal system to silence those who doubt his claims, which, I may add, are incessant. The man cannot go 2 words without bringing up his supposed Pac-Man and Donkey Kong triumphs. He obviously cares deeply about extracting praise and admiration from others, so much so that this obsessive need appears to be producing his downfall. He is so married to the idea that he is God's gift to arcade gaming that he will threaten legal action against anyone who makes the reasonable statement that his conquests were mostly fabricated and entrenched in lies and deception. Mitchell attacks everyone who opposes him, and I am his latest victim. It seems as though Mitchell didn't appreciate his cameo in my previous video, which was mostly focused on Guinness World Records. I lambasted Guinness for their shady practices and their reinstatement of records from a proven cheater, otherwise known as Billy Mitchell. Mitchell was upset by this and thought it was a good idea to begin a defamation claim against me. He contacted multiple lawyers in my state, eventually finding one gullible enough to forward on a notice demanding that I take down the video, apologize, and pay him $150,000. You heard correctly, he is demanding $150,000 because I briefly mentioned him in a video 2 weeks ago. As ludicrous as this demand is, this video isn't even about that. What we are actually going to cover is his $1 million lawsuit against Twin Galaxies for the crime of claiming that 2 of the records they had on their database were not achieved on original arcade hardware. However, before we move on to that, I do want to address the notice Mitchell sent me, just to let you know how outrageous he really is. This is a concerns notice. This is the first step of the defamation process as outlined in the Defamation Act of Queensland 2005. Before you can take someone to court, you must give them notice and provide them with an opportunity to make amends. In this notice, it outlines Mitchell's history, which is the same self-indulgent story he tells at every opportunity. I won't retell it here. The important part is the next section that outlines the defamatory statements and what they mean. Now, I've seen a lot of videos and statements featuring Billy Mitchell, and from all of my experience, I truly believe Mitchell to be a compulsive liar. He lies constantly and everywhere, even in things that don't seem to provide any advantage. We will go into a lot of these lies later in the video, but even this concerns notice is no different. It starts out fine. It identifies the video I posted called Guinness World Records should stay out of gaming. It correctly points out that I stated that Guinness World Records were a scam, and that it had made a terrible decision to reinstate the world records of a proven cheater. It accurately outlines that I identified Billy Mitchell as said cheater, and says that I planned on making a future video. But here is where the lies start to creep in, as they always do. It claims that I stated that Guinness's decision was a slap in the face to all video gamers. This is provably untrue, as what I said was, Guinness's decision to reinstate Mitchell's records is a slap in the face to every gaming community that works hard to maintain records. It then falsely claims that I stated that Guinness had falsified its records. Again, at no point did I say this, and the video is right there for people to scour through. That doesn't even make sense, as Billy is the one that falsified records. Guinness just prints them. I never made any statements alluding to Guinness believing that the records were false either. I just implied their decisions were based on money, and that they should trust the experts. It goes on to lie again, saying that I stated that Guinness had been sufficiently paid off by Mitchell. What I actually said was, whether it's because they fear a lawsuit from Mitchell or they were sufficiently paid off, it's obvious all that matters to them is the bottom line. I don't know what arrangements Mitchell had with Guinness, which is why I posted 2 hypothetical reasons for their decision. It is very telling when a party grossly misquotes another when the statements are right there and readily available to cross-check. The notice gets even more ridiculous though. It makes the claim that the video imputed that Mitchell is a proven cheater, which is correct and can be demonstrably shown, but it also claims that the video suggests that Mitchell is a criminal. I have absolutely no idea where this came from and would love to see this explained. Lying about a record doesn't make you a criminal, nor does trying to get Guinness to post your records. This matter has nothing at all to do with criminality in any way, and it was never even so much as hinted that it was. It claims that the video imputed that Mitchell bribed Guinness to reinstate his records, but this has 2 problems. As per my previous point, this was never stated. It was only hinted at as the possible reason. But even if I did state definitively that Mitchell paid Guinness, this isn't a bribe, and the entire video highlighted the fact that Guinness charges exorbitant amounts of money to verify records. If morons want to pay a large fee to have Guinness verify their achievement, that's not bribery, it's just paying too much for a service. Here is the list of Mitchell's demands in order for me to avoid a lawsuit. 1. The deletion of the YouTube publication which was published on or about July 25th. 2. Your written undertaking never to repeat any of the allegations contained in the video about our client. 3. A written apology to our client. 4. Payment of our client's costs, which we estimate to be in the order of $1,500. 5. Payment of compensatory damages in the sum of $150,000. Needless to say, these supposed damages are absurd and highlight just how deluded Mitchell really is. I have to admit though, as insane as this threat is, and even though I have multiple defenses available to combat any legal action, getting this notice was not pleasant. Having just started a new family, I have more than myself to worry about. But unfortunately for Mitchell, I am a man of principle who will never be strong-armed into backing down from an action I believe to be right. I am extremely fortunate in that I have a large army of support behind me. I can't imagine how scary it would be for those less fortunate though, which is one of the reasons Mitchell must be stopped. And everything hinges on the lawsuit we are about to cover. Before we go on, I have to give a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, Ridge Wallets. Now, I am extremely appreciative of Ridge for supporting me throughout the craziness that's been going on this year. Sponsors truly do keep this channel alive. Ridge make amazing wallets. They are compact, streamlined, and feel great. I've always hated those huge traditional flip wallets, and all I ever take with me when I leave the house is my license and a credit card, so anything else is just overkill. The material is really strong and is backed by a lifetime warranty. Ridge are so confident in their product they offer a 45-day money-back guarantee, and you can get 10% off one of these bad boys today by going to ridge.com/legend or clicking the link in the description. William James Mitchell v. Twin Galaxies LLC, a $1 million lawsuit over video game high scores. What a wonderful world we live in. We will focus on this particular lawsuit as it has been actually served and responded to by Twin Galaxies, but it's not the only action Mitchell has taken. He also has a $1 million lawsuit filed against YouTuber Apollo Legend, a $1 million lawsuit against both the owner of the Donkey Kong forums and also Jeremy Young, who was the first person who originally started the dispute thread on Twin Galaxies. Mitchell also has a $10 million lawsuit against Twin Galaxies in a different state, which has not yet been served. I know almost all of you will know the backstory, but just in case you don't, I will very quickly explain. Billy Mitchell is a well-known arcade player who allegedly set high-score world records in the arcade game Donkey Kong. These records were featured on the Twin Galaxies scoreboard, who is the largest high-score keeping organization. Both Mitchell and Twin Galaxies were featured heavily in the documentary The King of Kong. If you haven't seen this documentary, I strongly recommend that you do. While there are many historical inaccuracies, and it omits a lot about what really happened, it is a really entertaining story that definitely truthfully captures a lot of the personalities surrounding the case. The contrast between the two main players, Steve Wiebe and Billy Mitchell, is striking, and makes for a fantastic narrative. In 2018, Twin Galaxies removed all of Billy Mitchell's records, including those not related to Donkey Kong, after an extensive investigation concluded that his two scores of 1,047,200 and 1,050,200 were not performed on an unmodified original Donkey Kong Arcade PCB. The PCB is the circuit board that houses the game itself, which outputs to the arcade monitor. The first thing that we need to clear up is what the lawsuit is actually for, as many people get this wrong. Mitchell is not suing Twin Galaxies for removing his high scores. He would have no legal grounds to do this, as Twin Galaxies is a private organization and can host whatever high scores it chooses. It can ban whoever it wants and requires no justification at all for doing so. Instead, this lawsuit is specifically against the statements that Twin Galaxies made, outlining that his scores were not performed on an original Donkey Kong arcade. Mitchell claims that this statement is false and that Twin Galaxies is aware of its falsity and is lying or at least intentionally suppressing the truth. The logic coming from the Mitchell camp is as follows. We have evidence. That evidence proves Mitchell legitimately achieved his scores. Twin Galaxies will not accept this evidence. Therefore, Twin Galaxies is suppressing the truth and is knowingly making statements with reckless disregard for their falsity. The problem is that the evidence that Mitchell provides is for all intents and purposes meaningless and doesn't speak to the actual issues at hand. It isn't as if he doesn't provide evidence at all. In fact, the exhibits Mitchell provides amount to a 214-page document. There is a lot there to unpack, but it's almost completely irrelevant to Twin Galaxy's rationale behind their decision. The decision to ban Mitchell was based on video recordings of the alleged performances, recordings that can be analyzed and studied as many times as one wishes. The vast majority of the evidence in support of the alleged high scores is eyewitness testimonies. However, eyewitness testimony carries no weight at all for a number of reasons. The first reason is a simple one: people can lie. This is why hard data is always a better means of proving legitimacy. But even in a hypothetical world where everyone always told the truth, eyewitness testimony would still be absolutely meaningless. The reality is that many forms of cheating simply cannot be detected with the human eye, let alone on the first viewing. This is obvious when it comes to something like doping in sports. In 1988, millions of people watched as Ben Johnson won gold and set a new world record in the 100-meter final at the Seoul Olympics. If you asked every single one of those witnesses, they would have all sworn that he had indeed won the race, and they wouldn't have been lying. But that doesn't mean he didn't cheat. 2 days later, his gold medal was stripped, and his world record time was disqualified after a blood sample returned a positive result for steroids. If Johnson were to then collect millions of sworn affidavits stating that he had won the race, that doesn't help his case or speak to the issue at hand. Human eyes cannot detect doping. It can only be determined by analysis after the fact, using specific technology to study the data in ways the human body cannot. When it comes to speedrunning, there have been countless examples of cheating that was exposed years later, but only through advanced analysis. For example, in Super Mario 64, several players that spliced together runs were caught out after the audio in their video evidence was studied in Audacity, an audio editing software. The audio discrepancies were so minute that it is literally impossible for the human ear to detect the splices. However, they become obvious when technology is used. In the case of Mitchell, it was video analysis that was the basis for the conclusion that his records weren't legitimate. The way each level was loaded was not reflective of an actual arcade unit, and perfectly represented what would appear if one were using emulation. Of course, levels load so quickly that you can't tell the difference when you watch the performance. It is only when going frame by frame that the smoking gun becomes apparent. Even if Mitchell's witnesses were all completely truthful, which I personally don't think is the case, it has no bearing on the evidence against him. They wouldn't be able to know the difference no matter how scrupulously they observed his high score when it happened. The current owner of Twin Galaxies, Jace Hall, is well aware of this fact, which is why he was not interested in hearing eyewitness testimonies. There are numerous times in Mitchell's suit where he points out that Hall did not want to accept eyewitness accounts. Mitchell attempts to paint this as intentional suppression of facts, but when you have the actual video, witnesses are no longer useful. To give you an idea about how ignorant Mitchell is of this basic logic, I'll read a portion of his legal argument. To its claim that Mitchell cheated, Twin Galaxies at trial will have to impeach each and every witness that swore under oath that they saw Mitchell achieve the scores. To date, Twin Galaxies has shown no indication that it will be able to do so. In fact, Twin Galaxies has not contacted any of the witnesses, and its motion does not attempt to discredit those witnesses' testimony. Thus, Twin Galaxies' case essentially rests on a conspiracy nearly as broad and untenable as the Kennedy assassination. Scores of people around the country with seemingly no connection to each other have agreed to lie and fabricate evidence that Mitchell achieved his records on arcade software. The cheating claim is ludicrous. In Mitchell's universe, no one can ever be fooled. People can detect any and all forms of cheating without the use of technology or without the need for further analysis. They can do this simply by being in proximity, and they don't even need to be experts on the game at hand. The amazing thing though is that his score of 1,047,200, the score featured on King of Kong, the score that earned him the Guinness World Record for the first million-point score, has 0 witnesses, not a single one. When you weed out the human element in his case, what you're left with are conspiracy theories and deceptive technical explanations that are either lies or ignorant to the point of hilarity. Mitchell attempts to argue against the video evidence in 2 ways. The first is by claiming that the videos aren't his actual performance. The second is claiming that the video performances aren't emulation, but are in fact produced by an original Donkey Kong board. In order to appreciate the absurdity of the claim that the videos aren't in fact of Billy Mitchell, we have to understand how we know that they are in fact his tapes. Mitchell does confirm that he provided tapes of his scores to Twin Galaxies. This is stated in Exhibit 20 of his lawsuit. Interestingly though, when his lawyer first contacted Twin Galaxies requesting they retract their statements, he provided an evidence package expressly stating that he never submitted videotapes of his scores. But he eventually had to ditch that argument when the evidence started stacking up. There was even posters that Twin Galaxies made at the time promoting his world record, saying that it was verified through videotape. Walter Day, the previous owner of Twin Galaxies, sent copies of Mitchell's submission of his 1,047,000 score to various referees to examine it. When the score was eventually disputed, Twin Galaxies contacted multiple ex-referees to ask for copies of the performance. One copy came from Dwayne Richards, who has been publicly outspoken against Mitchell. Mitchell claims that Richards must have edited the videotape in order to frame him. He actually wants you to believe that Dwayne Richards perfectly edited the transition screen for each level to make it look like it was performed on MAME. This ends up being a pretty funny claim though, even when you don't consider how ludicrous the technical feat would have been. Dwayne Richards wasn't the only source of the taped performance that Twin Galaxies got a hold of. It also got hold of a copy from Richie Knuckles, who was actually one of Mitchell's friends. He sent the footage to Jace in order to clear Mitchell's name, believing him to be innocent, and knowing that he did in fact have a copy of the original submission. Needless to say, both copies from the two different sources matched up perfectly. But not only did they match each other, they also matched other footage as well. In the King of Kong documentary, Billy's score was played on a TV at FunSpot. The gameplay footage shown is exactly the same as the two sourced copies. However, Billy's lawsuit claims that because the footage shown in the documentary didn't show any transition screens, you can't confirm those weren't edited later. Well, luckily we have more footage, this time from 2006, before The King of Kong was even released. In an interview with MTV, the head referee for Twin Galaxies at the time, Robert Merchek, played footage from a copy of the performance that Billy had sent him. Not only does this footage match all of the copies obtained for the investigation and the footage shown in The King of Kong, but it also shows a transition screen, which perfectly matches what you would see if you were using emulation. But Billy Mitchell still claims the footage on the tape is not him.
This is Bill Mitchell, the world's greatest Donkey Kong player, at 1,044,100, and he is in screen 116, and his score is now going to be 1,047,200 when the bonus is added. And at this point, you're going to see the kill screen in Donkey Kong. The game has an absolute conclusion, level 22-1. Notice the timer is back to 4,000 points. It started at 4,000. And Mario, who's over here, is going to die any second. The timer only went down by 300 points. That's the kill screen. The most you could possibly do in this game is get from here up to about that ladder before you die. No one can get past this point. So Billy, not only has he gotten to this point, he did so on his third life. So he could have made some extra points by intentionally killing himself off earlier and squeaking out a few extra points in the other board. Here's the initial phase. But he didn't choose to do so, and he still has the world's record of 1,047,000. And there's his ever-present USA logon. And there you have it, the world's record on Donkey Kong right before your eyes.
Okay, so Billy wants you to believe the footage everyone sees isn't him, but he also wants you to know that even if it were him, it's still legitimate footage that could have come from an original Donkey Kong PCB. Mitchell and numerous technical experts spent a huge amount of time researching ways a standard arcade board could produce the images seen on the tape. Unfortunately, he was not able to do so, and still hasn't provided any technical explanation as to how to produce the same transition screen images that were present in his performances. The important thing to understand is that it was never the goal of Twin Galaxies to determine precisely what method Mitchell used to create these tapes. The only relevant question is whether or not what we can see can be replicated using an original Donkey Kong board, and the answer is no. Mitchell cannot explain how these images happened the way that they did, but he does try to debunk a couple of issues that were ironed out during the investigation. One of them is the so-called girder finger. This is a small part of the girder that hasn't been fully drawn during the transition screen on emulator. This doesn't appear during transition screens on an actual arcade, as they render completely differently. A critical thing to realize though is that this girder finger is not the problem with Billy's tapes. The problem is the entire transition screen. Everything about it renders in a different way. Ignoring everything else and focusing on this girder finger alone, a tiny portion of a single frame of footage isn't relevant. In any case, during the investigation, it was uncovered that this girder finger was not appearing on transition screens using the versions of MAME that were available in 2004. Keep in mind that everything else matched the videotapes and was still different to arcade, but Mitchell's team jumped on this one discrepancy and claimed that it exonerated him. It was quickly realized though that the girder finger only fails to draw using the default settings of the emulator. If the refresh rate is changed from 60Hz to 60.6 Hz, which is the actual refresh rate of Donkey Kong, the finger appears. In the official dispute thread, Wes Copeland, one of the greatest Donkey Kong players of all time, stated, "By enabling cheats and setting the refresh rate to 60.6 frames per second, the arcade machine's rate, instead of MAME's default 60 FPS, the girder tail draws every time." According to Mitchell, Copeland is lying about the refresh rate of Donkey Kong, and is using an arbitrary setting to try to force the girder finger to appear. This is quite a damning claim, but it seems to conflict with all available evidence. In the arcade gaming world, it is pretty well known that Donkey Kong does in fact run at 60.6 Hz. There are numerous forum posts, many taking place years before this entire debacle, stating that the game runs at 60.6. For example, a post from 2009 reads, "Ever since I upgraded to MAME version 132, I have noticed a lot of sound stutters in games that never had them before. Donkey Kong and Star Wars are definite offenders." You Rebel Scum replied, "One of two issues could be your cause. A, you're running at 60 Hz and the game ran at faster, and after 0.106, MAME's sound was more affected by the screen's refresh rate. Both Donkey Kong and Star Wars run at 60.6 Hz. In 2013, one forum user posted a topic titled, "Success with MAME and custom refresh rates, no tearing." They stated, "I just wanted to write about my MAME setup that works without screen tearing and hopefully minimal lag for some games." In the post, he outlines the games he uses and their refresh rates. Donkey Kong is listed as 60.6 Hz. It is almost universally known among retro gamers that running a game at a different frame rate than what was intended can cause issues. This is why when using emulation, you often need to know the exact technical specifications of the game to run it properly. But let's not trust random arcade experts on the internet. The official 1981 manual that came with the machine gives us the exact schematics of the PCB. Now granted, you may need to be an electrical engineer to understand what these images mean, but I've asked numerous experts who all confirmed that based on what's provided in the official documentation, we can calculate the refresh rate to be 60.6 Hz. But again, let's not trust experts and the official documentation. We can literally measure the output of a Donkey Kong arcade board using an oscilloscope to get the exact refresh rate. Spoiler alert, it is in fact 60.6 Hz. Billy Mitchell claims the refresh rate is not 60.6 Hz, but rather 60 Hz, and his evidence for this is amazing. He provides the specifications for the monitor used in Donkey Kong arcade cabinets, the Sanyo Easy-20. He doesn't understand the difference between the scan rate on a monitor and the vertical refresh rate created by the game itself. This is a pretty epic blunder to be included in a legal document. We already know that Mitchell has a team of technical experts working around the clock to find ways to justify his footage, so I can't believe this is a simple mistake. I'd guess, as with everything else, this is intentional deception. In their evidence exhibits, they also include a frame from a video appearing to show a girder finger. Their argument is that this frame proves that the girder finger can occur on an original arcade. But this frame isn't from a transition screen, which are the issue with Billy's tapes. This frame is from the game's loading screen, before the gameplay even begins. If the tapes aren't from Mitchell, why is he trying so desperately to prove that the footage could have been produced on an original arcade? He has always stated that the tapes weren't his, so why does he focus on the footage at all? It makes no logical sense. Billy has even already admitted that the footage is MAME.
And the fact of the matter is, everybody is looking at the film and everybody is questioning the fact, was it arcade or was it MAME?
What is MAME exactly, for those who may not know?
Okay, I've never even played MAME. I don't have MAME loaded in my home. But basically, MAME is an emulation of what is in the arcade.
That's right.
It's just not the arcade. Therefore, it's a different platform. There are MAME world records. There is Donkey Kong MAME world records, okay? And the film footage that he has, that Jeremy has, shows MAME play.
MAME.
Now, I contend that if he gets the original tape, or he gets the original room shot, he will see that what I say is true. I'm not disputing what he says. What I'm disputing is the fact that I want him to have the original tape.
Okay.
This video has already gone on pretty long, and honestly, we've addressed most of what Mitchell's evidence has to offer. As I previously mentioned, most of his arguments relies on unreliable witness testimony, and the technical aspects of his case are at best ignorant and at worst deceptive and slanderous. He also complains heavily that people don't like him. This is an attempt to show malice, and create doubt that any evidence they bring forth is legitimate. One thing I've noticed about narcissists is that they always find excuses for why people don't like them. It is never because of their actions. They will claim it's because people want to dislike them, because they have already made up their mind and nothing will ever change that. Mitchell claims that Twin Galaxies weren't interested in being shown the truth and were always against Mitchell. But the reality is that Twin Galaxies spent an insane amount of time and energy trying to help Mitchell validate his footage. They bought recording equipment, did extensive testing on actual hardware, and even extended the length of the investigation because Mitchell requested it. It took more than 7 months for a verdict to be made, and the entire time, everyone was waiting for Mitchell to submit evidence that shows why his footage looks the way that it does, but the evidence never came. As someone who is involved in the speedrunning community, I can tell you that our perception of the investigation was completely different to what Mitchell is asserting. Speedrunners were furious and shocked at how long this investigation went on, given the fact that clear evidence had been given. In both of the Todd Rogers and Billy Mitchell disputes, many people declared that Twin Galaxies owner Jace Hall was being intentionally aloof and combative. At the end of the day, I believe this all came down to impatience. People wanted Billy gone as soon as the evidence came out, and they probably weren't wrong, but Twin Galaxies wanted to give him time to defend himself. It's just that he never did. I know Twin Galaxies has a pretty messed up past, but we really need to support them now. The Twin Galaxies of today is not the same as it once was. I have spoken to Jace Hall a few times, and he definitely seems like he does care about gaming and wants to celebrate the highest levels of achievement. Their removal of the old guard and players like Todd Rogers and Billy Mitchell just go to show that they now do actually value integrity. It really does seem like a different place, and this is coming from someone who has made entire videos about how corrupt it was. But possibly more importantly is that Twin Galaxies is fighting the fight for every gaming community that values being able to find and weed out cheaters. If Twin Galaxies loses, it would be an incredibly damaging precedent to set. Mitchell would go on to serve all of his currently filed lawsuits, and you better believe he would file more. Defeating Mitchell would benefit everyone, and losing would be disastrous. Now is the time to come together. Thank you so much for watching, you legends. I hope you are having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.